I thought I was doing something sweet that morning. I packed a basket with Daniel's favorite snacks, those chocolate-covered almonds he devours, the cheese crackers he insists are just for work, and his precious sparkling water. I told myself he'd be exhausted from all the late nights at the office, so maybe a little surprise would cheer him up. I wanted to remind him that I was thinking of him, even when he seemed far away. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee as my heels clicked across the floor. Daniel's secretary looked up, smiled politely, and waved me through. I felt my heart race with anticipation, like I was carrying a piece of home into his sterile office world. I could almost see his boyish grin in my mind, the one he used to flash so easily when I walked into a room. I thought today might be one of those moments, but the second I stepped into his office, everything shifted. My eyes locked on his computer screen and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a spreadsheet or a presentation, it was a photo. Daniel, my husband, his arms wrapped around another woman. They weren't just smiling, they were glowing, holding each other like lovers, not colleagues. My hands shook so hard the basket nearly slipped from my fingers. And in that instant, the room felt colder than I ever imagined. Daniel's head snapped up the moment he realized I was standing there. His hand scrambled across the mouse, minimizing the window as if erasing the image could erase the truth. I forced a smile, but my jaw felt like it was made of stone. "Daniel, mind explaining who she is?" I asked, my voice calm, though my chest burned. He shifted uncomfortably, fumbling for words. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a client. We took that picture at a company event," he stammered, his tone too quick, too rehearsed. I narrowed my eyes, studying him the way I used to study contracts back when details could make or break everything. "Strange," I said slowly, tilting my head. "I've never seen you hold a client like that before." The silence that followed was heavier than the walls around us. "You're overthinking again, Sophia. You always do this," he muttered, his voice sharpening like a blade meant to cut me down. For a second, I thought about pushing harder, demanding answers right there in front of him. But the secretary was just outside, and I wasn't about to give Daniel the satisfaction of watching me unravel in public. So I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to stand taller, even as my heart threatened to collapse inside me. I didn't argue. Not there, not in his office with the faint hum of printers and the smell of stale coffee filling the air. Instead, I clutched the basket tighter, like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My smile stayed fixed, but inside, something had cracked. I could feel the jagged edges scraping against me, each beat of my heart echoing the photo burned into my mind. Daniel leaned back in his chair, pretending to be unfazed, but I caught the way his eyes darted to the door, making sure no one else had seen. That alone told me more than his words ever could. He wanted this hidden. He wanted her hidden. I nodded lightly, pretending to accept his explanation, even though my stomach twisted with every breath. It was a performance, and we both knew it. When I finally turned to leave, the office felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. My heels tapped against the floor with steady precision, but my chest was anything but steady. Outside, the secretary offered me another polite smile, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I walked out carrying the same basket I had brought in, only now it felt like dead weight. My heart was sinking fast, but one thing was certain. I wasn't done searching for the truth. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the photo replaying over and over in my head like a cruel slideshow. Daniel lay beside me, scrolling on his phone, acting as if nothing had happened. My body was there, under the same covers, but my mind was still in his office, still frozen in front of that screen. I could feel the weight of every detail, the way his hand rested on her waist, the way he smiled, so unguarded, so alive. When he finally set his phone down, he turned toward me, brushing a strand of hair from my face with unusual tenderness. "You okay?" he asked softly, too softly, like he was trying to distract me with sweetness. My instincts screamed louder than his gentle tone. He was trying too hard, and I knew it. Daniel hadn't touched me like that in weeks, maybe months. Now suddenly I was supposed to believe it was love? No, it was guilt. I swallowed my anger and forced a little smile, keeping my voice casual. So, did your client enjoy the event? I asked, rolling onto my side as if I wasn't really paying attention. He froze for a second, then forced a laugh. Yeah, she did. Very professional. Nothing special. His words stumbled over each other like broken glass. I could almost hear the lie, sharp and cutting, hiding beneath his shaky attempt at calm. I turned my head slowly, catching his eyes in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. Funny, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, because that photo looked like anything but professional. His jaw tightened, and for a split second I saw something flicker. Fear, maybe, or anger, before he plastered on a cold mask. He hated being cornered, and I knew I had just touched a nerve. Enough, Sophia, he snapped, his voice slicing through the quiet room. You're paranoid. The word echoed, harsh and familiar, like a weapon he'd used before. My chest tightened, not from guilt but from recognition. This was his defense, always turning the suspicion back on me, making me question my own eyes, my own heart. But this time I wasn't confused. I knew what I saw, and no amount of gaslighting would make me unsee it. I pulled the blanket closer, not for warmth but for protection, creating a barrier between us. My silence was louder than any argument. Inside, the storm raged on, but outside I stayed still, calculating. If Daniel thought I was paranoid, fine. Let him. Because I was done asking for honesty. From now on, I'd find the truth myself, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. Daniel turned his back to me, pulling the covers up like he could shield himself from the tension he'd created. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing faster than I could breathe. Every detail of that photo kept surfacing, the way his shoulders leaned into her, the intimacy in their smiles. Those weren't the expressions of a client dinner. They were the expressions of a man living a double life. I thought about the years we had built together, the quiet mornings with coffee, the birthdays, the promises whispered late at night. And now, all of it felt like it was balanced on a knife's edge. If I pushed too hard, it would all come crashing down. But if I stayed quiet, I'd drown in my own doubts. That was the cruelest part. Silence hurt almost as much as the lies. As the night dragged on, I made myself a vow. I wouldn't accuse him again. I wouldn't let him twist the truth into paranoia. No, if he thought he was clever, I'd be cleverer. I would watch, I would wait, and I would uncover everything he thought he could hide, because deep down, I already knew the truth. Now, I just needed the proof. The next morning, I woke up with a plan already forming in my mind. I wasn't going to let Daniel's words be the last note of this song. I needed clarity, and if he wouldn't give it to me, I'd take it myself. So I dressed carefully, choosing a neutral smile and an excuse about dropping off documents he had forgotten. My heart pounded as I walked into that same office building, the polished floor now feeling like the stage of a performance only I knew I was starring in. The secretary greeted me again, this time with a hint of hesitation in her eyes. I could sense she already knew what I was really there for, but she didn't stop me. I held a folder close to my chest, pretending it was the reason for my visit, though in truth, it was nothing more than a prop. Every step toward Daniel's office felt heavier, weighed down by the memory of that wallpaper and the way he dismissed me so easily. When I reached the desk, I leaned against it casually, lowering my voice. That woman in the photo on his computer, she seemed familiar. Who is she? The words slipped out with a softness that masked the steel beneath. The secretary froze, her lips parting but no sound coming out at first. Her eyes darted around like the walls themselves might betray her if she spoke. In that silence, I felt the truth inching closer, ready to cut. She finally whispered, I shouldn't say. Her hands fidgeted with a stack of papers, eyes refusing to meet mine. That hesitation told me everything. If it had been harmless, she would have laughed it off, brushed away my question without a second thought. Instead, her silence screamed louder than any confession. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice until it felt like a plea. Please, I deserve the truth. Her shoulders slumped as if carrying a weight she'd been holding for too long. She's not a client, she said softly, her voice breaking the room's stillness. She's been around a lot. Too much, honestly. My chest tightened, but I pressed on, unwilling to let her words dangle in the air unfinished. Who is she? I demanded, not harsh, but steady, like I was bracing myself for impact I already expected. The secretary's eyes finally lifted to mine, and in them, I saw both pity and guilt. She's his girlfriend, Sophia. Everyone here knows. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me, and for a moment I couldn't feel my legs. The words hit harder than I imagined, not because I didn't expect them, but because hearing them out loud made it real. I wanted to crumble right there, but instead, I stood taller, letting my anger harden into something sharper than grief. I thanked her quietly, though the words felt hollow leaving my lips. My hands trembled as I held onto the folder, gripping it like a lifeline while my world cracked wide open. Inside, a part of me screamed, demanding I collapse, cry, demand answers from Daniel right then and there. But another part, the stronger part, refused to give him that satisfaction. If this was the truth, then I'd use it. I'd turn it into my weapon. Walking back to the elevator, every step felt like walking through water, heavy and deliberate. People passed by, chatting about deadlines and lunch plans, completely unaware that my marriage had just ended in the middle of that office. I pressed the button, staring at my reflection in the metallic doors. I didn't look broken. I looked composed, almost frighteningly so, and maybe that was my first victory. As the elevator doors slid shut, I made myself a promise. Daniel thought he could make a fool of me in front of his colleagues, parade his affair like it was invisible, but he underestimated me. If he wanted to betray me, then I would make sure the cost was higher than he ever imagined. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something he'd never see coming. I waited for him that night, the house unnervingly quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I had printed the photo and laid it neatly on the dining table, right where he couldn't miss it. The image stared back at me, daring me to keep my composure when the moment came. My chest felt tight, but I kept my shoulders squared, my breathing steady. I wasn't the woman who begged. Not anymore. The sound of his car pulling into the driveway made my pulse race, but I didn't move. I sat there, hands folded, eyes fixed on the door. When Daniel walked in, his smile was casual, distracted, until his gaze landed on the table. He froze, color draining from his face, and I watched him unravel in the silence. For once I had the power, and he knew it before I even opened my mouth. I spoke to your secretary, I said coldly, my voice slicing through the air. She was honest with me, unlike you. His jaw tightened, anger flashing across his face. How dare you interrogate people at my office? He barked, his tone sharp, defensive. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his, and slid the photo across the table like a piece of evidence in a trial. The time for lies was over. How dare you betray me and parade her picture on your work computer? I snapped, my voice trembling but strong enough to cut through his excuses. Tell me, Daniel, was our entire marriage just a cover-up? My words landed like blows, each one daring him to deny what I already knew. His face contorted with anger, but beneath it I caught a glimpse of something else. Fear. For the first time, he was cornered. I never loved you the way I love her, he shouted, the confession bursting out like poison. The words sliced through me, sharper than I could have imagined, yet strangely clarifying. My chest ached, but there was a twisted sense of relief in hearing him admit it. No more illusions, no more pretending. He had given me exactly what I came for, the truth, raw and unfiltered. I leaned back slowly, a bitter smile spreading across my face. Thank you, I said, almost whispering, though the silence around us carried it like thunder. That's all I needed to hear. His eyes widened, like he expected tears, maybe even a breakdown. Instead, I met his gaze with calm fire, letting him see that his words hadn't destroyed me. they had set me free. And in that moment, I knew the next step was mine to take. The argument raged on, his voice rising, mine holding steady like a shield. He hurled accusations, called me ungrateful, dramatic, impossible to please. But every word he spat only widened the space between us. I no longer felt the sting of his insults. They sounded small, desperate, like a man fighting not for love, but for control slipping through his fingers. I let him talk until his fury burned itself out, and then I stood. The chair scraped against the floor, sharp and final, pulling his eyes back to me. "This conversation is over," I said, calm and unwavering. My heart pounded inside my chest, but my voice carried no tremor. It was the sound of a woman who had nothing left to lose, and everything to reclaim. As I turned away, leaving him frozen in the kitchen with his fists clenched, I felt an odd clarity settle over me. The storm had passed, but in its wake came a stillness I hadn't known in years. He thought his confession had broken me. What he didn't realize was that it had given me strength. Now the only thing left was to decide how far I was willing to take it. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I woke up with a clarity that felt almost electric. While Daniel went about his routine as if nothing had happened, I was already 3 steps ahead. I called the bank, froze our joint accounts, and secured the savings I had quietly built over the years. Every keystroke, every confirmation, felt like stitching myself back together. For once, I wasn't reacting, I was leading. Then I called my lawyer. The evidence was all there. The photo, the secretary's words, his own confession. I didn't need to embellish a thing. The truth was damning enough. Filing for divorce was easier than I expected, like closing a door that should have been shut long ago. My hands shook when I signed the papers, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, the thrill of taking back my power. Word traveled fast at his office. By lunchtime, whispers curled through the halls, carrying pieces of his downfall like wildfire. I didn't need to expose him. He did that all on his own. The man who once strutted with pride was now shrinking under the weight of his own choices. And watching that unravel from a distance, it was colder, sharper, and far more satisfying than any screaming match could ever be. Daniel came storming into the house that evening, his face flushed with panic. "Sophia, please, don't do this," he begged, his voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "Don't destroy me." For years I had imagined what it would feel like to see him stripped of his arrogance, and now it was unfolding right in front of me. But instead of pity, I felt nothing but a cold, steady calm. "You said I overthink," I replied, my tone even and deliberate. "Turns out, I underthought you. But don't worry, you won't have to hide her anymore. You'll be hiding from creditors and colleagues instead." His eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a man gasping for air. Every excuse, every denial he had rehearsed was useless now. I had taken control of the story, and he knew it. For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, shoulders hunched, hands trembling at his sides. And yet, there was no satisfaction in his pleading, only validation. He had gambled everything we built, and now he was paying the price. I stood taller, steady as stone, knowing this was only the beginning of his undoing. I picked up my purse from the chair and walked toward the door, his desperate eyes following me. "Sophia," he pleaded again, his voice cracking. "We can fix this. I'll end it. I'll make it right." I paused, hand resting on the doorknob, and turned to face him one last time. The man standing there wasn't the husband I once loved. He was a stranger, exposed and broken by his own choices. "You destroyed yourself," I said calmly, each word deliberate, final. "I'm just making sure everyone sees it." His lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, Daniel had no weapon, no lie sharp enough to wound me. The silence between us was louder than any argument, and in it, I felt an unfamiliar freedom unfurling inside me. I opened the door and stepped out, the night air cool against my skin. With every step I took away from that house, the weight on my chest lifted, piece by piece. This wasn't just an ending, it was the opening act of something new. My revenge wasn't about rage or fire. It was cold, calculated, and devastatingly clear. And deep down, I knew he'd never recover from it. Months later, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. Gone was the heaviness in my eyes, the constant tension in my shoulders. In its place was someone lighter, sharper, freer. I had poured my energy into building something of my own, a consultancy firm that carried my name, my vision, my rules. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Clients admired my confidence, colleagues respected my drive, and I learned what it meant to stand on my own 2 feet. I wasn't defined by Daniel's betrayal anymore. I was defined by how I rose from it. Every morning, when I brewed my coffee and opened my laptop, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing I had taken back everything he thought he'd stolen. This was my life, rebuilt on my terms. One afternoon, walking through the city, I saw him. Daniel. Disheveled, shoulders hunched, eyes dimmed with shame. For a split second, our gazes met, and time froze. He looked at me the way a man looks at something he once owned but lost forever. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't twist. All I felt was clarity, sharp and calm, as I stopped to hear what he had to say. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, almost broken. "I made a mistake. Can we at least talk?" For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words, of him finally admitting he had been wrong. But now, standing in front of him, I realized I no longer needed them. His regret didn't heal me, and his shame didn't define me. They were simply the consequences of choices he made, and they belonged to him, not me. I let a small smile curve across my lips, not cruel, just certain. "Talk?" I repeated, tilting my head. "You gave your love to someone else, Daniel. And I gave my life back to myself. That's the best deal I've ever made." His eyes filled with something raw, maybe sorrow, maybe envy. But none of it touched me. I wasn't standing there to absorb his pain. I was standing there as proof that I had moved past it. For the first time, I felt no pull, no sting, no ache. He was simply a man I used to know, and I was no longer tethered to his story. Without another word, I adjusted my bag on my shoulder, straightened my posture, and turned away. The sound of my footsteps was steady, unshaken, carrying me forward into a life where freedom tasted sweeter than any apology he could ever offer. As I walked away, the city around me seemed brighter, every sound sharper, every color more alive. The weight I had carried for years was gone, replaced by something I hadn't felt in so long: peace. I breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill my lungs, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about Daniel, or the past, or the pain. I was thinking only about me, about the future I had claimed with my own 2 hands. There was no bitterness left, no lingering desire for revenge. I had already served it, cold and precise, and the aftermath spoke louder than any words I could have shouted. He was broken, and I was whole. That was justice enough. My life had become my own again, not shaped by betrayal, but by resilience and the choice to keep moving forward. Freedom didn't come wrapped in celebration or fireworks. It came quietly, in small victories, in the steady rhythm of rebuilding. And as I disappeared into the crowd that afternoon, I carried a truth with me. Love can end, trust can shatter, but strength is something no one can take. And mine was only just beginning.